Welcome to the ArcFlash podcast, sparking new ideas in the data center sector. I'm Kevin Bowden.
And I'm Jabez 10, and we're here to provide a balanced, nuanced, and hopefully unbiased view on the state and most pressing topics affecting the data center and hyperscale cloud industry. We all want to see our industry succeed, but we're also not naive cheerleaders nor doomsayers. What we ultimately believe is the best way forward to see the industry experience sustainable growth is by addressing and being transparent with the challenges and sharing key themes and trends that are unfolding in the sector. I've been covering this space as an industry research analyst since 2011 and currently work at Structure Research. And we have a special guest here. Kevin, would you like to introduce her?
Absolutely, and I'm proud to present to everyone my former colleague from our past lives, Brittany Taylor. Brittany, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you guys. I'm excited to be here.
And maybe before we get into the subject matter, do you want to share some of your background, your sort of long journey throughout the data center industry?
Yeah, definitely. So my background and what I do now is all around the facility management of the critical infrastructure. And I started with a focus on power generation, which then kind of shifted to adding on cooling and electrical and design, and providing maintenance to data center clients, for, from colos to enterprise clients, to cloud hyperscalers, which I feel very fortunate in because that has allowed me a very well-rounded kind of view with our industry, right? And it also provides me with some insight of best practices and being able to provide different ways of looking at things and doing things to my clients now.
And
And
so,
now I'm with CBRE and in the data center solutions group, in our global hyperscaler division, which is uh, the sort of what we call the special forces of what we do, and to target these niche clients that have this global hyperscale presence, and it needs that level of expertise to help provide the best possible solutions.
with all those varied experiences throughout the industry, I mean, you've seen it through every prism there is essentially.
Yeah.
So with the sourcing and the supply chain issues we hear about each and every day, like we're all affected by this.
Yeah.
What's your perception of how that's changed over the last few years, and what are you doing to ameliorate some of those difficulties in your daily work?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say it's definitely improved from 2020, right? It's still not, I don't think with the demand and the way certain things have changed, it's ever going to, or not in the foreseeable future, go back to how it used to be. Um, and so really what that requires is just a more proactive strategic approach. So from a design and construction standpoint, where people used to start planning, a year and a half ahead of time. Now it's a way longer lead time there. It's also about staging and proactively ordering this stuff in advance. So if you have multiple builds in Europe, right, and everybody's kind of moving to a more modular design, staging it somewhere maybe more centrally, or maybe not, but you can pull from what you need based on demand. So if this project's moving a little faster but you don't have that yet, and there's maybe some regulatory things, due to whatever it may be in a different country, pull those there, and you still have those other parts and pieces on order ahead of time. So it's just really about getting creative and being very proactive. And what we see a lot, especially with project work where, there's more equipment purchasing involved, you know, from a outsourcing perspective, the service providers ordering before you win. And sometimes that's how you win the work. You honestly have to be that proactive in your approach to it, in order to succeed and get things done and on time at all. And sometimes there's those things, like I said, regulatory things that are out of your control, but having that expertise too, as like in that global approach, and boots on the ground there is really what helps push those things through as well.
And Brittany, do you think that this is becoming sort of a scale game where it's almost like because you have to, like you said, plan like 3, 5 years ahead now instead of 1.5 years ahead, you have to do bulk purchases of gen sets, you have to start committing to large quantities of power from the
Yep.
grid. Is that sort of, the bigger players are just going to get bigger, or that also makes, hyperscalers a more attractive sort of client for these countries or these jurisdictions to.
Yes, because also it's they're having to evolve the actual hyperscalers themselves to get the green light to order for multiple projects ahead of time. I mean, we can't no longer be holding onto the purse strings so tightly that it's taking too long, because then you're going to end up at a loss because nothing's built, and so you're just out all of that cost. So it is definitely a more, let's order everything, let's get as much as we can, and then it's always economies of scale, like depending of who the client is and how they purchase and source and design. If the bigger client you are anywhere, you're going to get preferential treatment. So those buying in bulk, that's how you're going to get it, right? And that's how you're going to start getting what you need. And then I guess another good point to bring up too is sort of a change of, again, this is very much depending on what type we're talking about of, can we reuse things? Can we refit things? Can we, again, you have to kind of stay a little bit more agile and flexible and innovative than you used to.
Gotcha. And so that's changed with this proliferation of AI workloads too now, right? Like design has changed,
Yeah.
cooling has changed. So how have you seen this adding AI to the mix over the last year or two? How has that changed some of this project management that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, and there's certain parts of it that I think are a little yet to be seen. There's not one, I think, clear path forward, because we have to also consider all the other initiatives that we're trying to accomplish with getting greener, and but then we also have power shortages. So there's multiple almost conflicting things that we're trying to solve for at the same time. I think one of the biggest conversations, in my world is the cooling design changes that we're going to see. The denser capacity of those racks, the air cooled designs are not going to work. So switching to the water cooled, and kind of that next step is the direct to chip cooling, and so whether it's how expensive it's going to be, everyone's going to have to, everybody that has the legacy air cooled designs, I think we will see a lot of refitting of the entire design of the data center in order to accomplish that goal. And that's going to be very interesting, I think, because that's not easy to do. So in general, I think we're going to start seeing designs that are just more flexible in nature, because I think what we've all learned is there's so much that is unforeseeable. We have no idea, what the next thing is going to be, and how we're going to be able to solve for the climate of it all, the climate change, and trying to make sure that we're accomplishing those goals as well. So there's some of that technology that I don't think exists yet. And, even if you go backwards, Kevin, I remember you and I having a conversation about immersion cooling. And, I don't think that that's really become the player that a lot of people thought it was going to be. It for efficiency reasons. It's the best way to do it from a dense point, but it just is hard to implement, especially, impossible with the hyperscalers. So I think the technology doesn't exist yet. I think it will. I think we'll get there. We have brilliant people in our industry. But we have to have this more flexible design that we can do those changes in a way that is also still cost efficient.
Yeah, Brittany, you touched on a very pressing topic, which is the cooling design and how that is impacted by AI. And I get asked this question a lot from our investor clients, and I wanted to get your take on it, given that you're sort of closer to, what's happening on the ground. Which is, I think the key worry for a lot of people is that the data centers that were sort of quote unquote new, that were built in the last 3 years, like pre this AI boom happening, there's a real worry that these data centers will get obsolete even quicker. The pace of obsolescence will get quicker than before. And that's, I think, what's on a lot of people's minds, is because, like you said, if something changes with cooling and you need to, fit it out for direct to chip or rear door heat exchangers or some form of air assisted liquid cooling setup, does that make the data centers that sort of have been built over the last few years, obsolete quicker, or is there a way for them to augment and pivot, like you were talking about earlier, to address those?
Yeah, I think that answer is no, and I think that they will pivot. They'll have to. The demand that we have is too great to let that go away. So I mean, we're going to see a lot of people fully redesigning, and having project managing that is going to be kind of a challenge. Not kind of, it's going to be a challenge, but it's going to happen. We're definitely going to see that, and how soon, exactly how that's going to roll out. I'm not sure, but I know it will happen. I know it will happen.
One thing we were talking about before we got on, and you had a great reminder to me of something that I don't often think about, is maintenance standards and how important those are to ops in general. And of course they are. I just, I tend to overlook that in my daily thought process, but that's one of the most important things. So
Yeah.
with new cooling and all this new technology that we're trying to integrate into the building, that's shifting too. So it would be great if you could share your opinion on some of like how you keep those maintenance standards up, what good practices and so forth, because I think that's going to be really helpful as people take on this new tech.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, like if you look backwards 10 years, there was this industry standard. There's this one path that this is how you do it, and that is the only way. And even that, started to change over time. For generator maintenance, for example, it was you have to change the oil every single year, and then it shifted to, well, actually, you really don't. Like you don't, and especially those large hyperscalers, when they have redundancy to the extent that they do, and they're just not getting used like that. So it's more testing the fluids versus changing the oil. And the same thing with everything. And I think really the answer is it's going to be way more customized to each individual client and site, based on their load, based on their equipment, based on their geography, than we used to see in the past, that there's not just this one path forward. And I think we're going to see a lot of the larger hyperscale clients, and in some facets, some of them already do this in certain areas, moving to more of a run to fail model, versus, historically that was just crazy to think about. It's mission critical. That's why I have my phone all the time. It's, it was just crazy to think about. But with that being said, if they move to that model, then that kind of creates the monitoring has to be there. You need, enough boots on the ground to cover and be there as quickly as you can. You need to have parts on hand right there to be able to handle that. And you got to do it correctly, because that can't be for everything. Especially when you're talking about these modular designs where all of these things were in this phase were, implemented at the same time. And so it is possible that you could have more cascading failure. So I think there's going to need to be a lot of controls in place with that.
Yeah, and you have a pretty unique purview, Brittany, because your role is global. So you not only just see what's happening in the Americas, but also you're in Europe right now, if our audience didn't know, and then you've also been to Asia as well. And so what are some of the differences, if any, that you see by each region? I mean, you probably don't have to go to, you can speak at a high
I
level, but
mean,
yeah.
yeah, as far as maintenance standards or anything goes, I per client that there's not really any differences. I think the big difference is more around skilled labor and how easy it is or difficult. I don't think it's easy anywhere globally to get skilled labor on site. And I think we're going to see more outsourcing to groups like CBRE, where we have such a global reach. We have boots on the ground and more countries than anybody else. And they're going to have to, do more and more of that. Because again, it's a global issue, but there is some areas where it's more challenging than others. And especially with, certain emerging markets and, do you have the ability to train people to be data center ready, and have the right mix of people that are, and, import people that are data center ready, and then have the other mix where it's people that have the local knowledge too, that we train up, and that's more of the differences that I see from a global perspective. It's a global problem, but again, especially in remote areas, like this is a problem, but now we're 2 hours away from a major city. That's a whole different level of challenge, and especially in certain markets where this is sort of a new industry to them.
Mm.
And the blend of training on site almost is kind of what you're indicating, right? What by trained people or
Yeah,
the
like
retraining, like
we're
how.
not there really,
Okay.
but it is having the right training programs in place. And that's really a big part of the value that we have, right? The library of resources, best practices, the technical experts that can come and help, for even more advanced escalated things, like that. All of those resources and training tools is really what you need to be looking at, if you're looking at sourcing to help with this issue or to fully operate your data center. And yeah, I mean, there is a world where we're, being very strategic and proactive with recruiting, getting apprentice programs, partnerships with all the schools, veteran recruiting. That's something we're really big in. In fact, Kevin, my husband is a retired Green Beret. So I'm personally going to be doing a lot of career mentoring with the Green Beret Foundation. And then there's a whole other program at CBRE that is very active in that. So we're being very, proactive and strategic, solving for our short-term needs, but also looking down the road. And it depends again on the client, because we also have a program that I think is really great for certain clients of multi-skilled technicians. So they work on the mechanical and electrical, but they also can do basic white space tasks. And we have the right processes and controls to make sure that it's all done still at standard, to what our clients expect. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, and people kind of following CBRE's lead there, because we have to be efficient with our labor pool. And also, another thing we're doing is looking at the areas where maybe the shortage, or there's not as many data centers, kind of more emerging markets, but there's more labor, and people that want to relocate or that want jobs, and being very proactive with sourcing there as well.
Yeah, and I think, with just to help our audience understand the importance of skilled labor, I kind of want to put you on the spot a little bit and ask you to play sort of a data center criteria ranking game. There's no right or wrong answer, but how would you rank these in
Oh,
terms of like least important to most important? So you have, I guess, power availability and generation, you have connectivity, you have sustainable, the sustainability angle, which is probably like access to renewable energy or very efficient free air cooling, so sustainability, and then you have availability of skilled labor, and then I don't know, maybe there's more that I'm missing, but how would you rank those from, in your view, from least important to most important?
I mean, I think power availability has to be most important.
Hmm.
That is probably the biggest constraint, I think, in the industry when it comes to site selection. But I also think the skilled labor availability is something that is often overlooked
Hmm.
and very much under, I guess, appreciated. I don't know what the right word is, but
Hmm.
I was saying it for a long time when we were looking at our reports and the criterias that we would have of this needs to be a part of it, for several years now, because it's almost like in a lot of companies you have this group that's picking out the sites and doing the design that isn't necessarily talking to operations. And I think you're going to start seeing that connectivity more because you're going to have to.
Hmm.
But again, that's also kind of my job. That's where I bring the value, is to figure that out and solve that for
Hmm.
you. But I would put that at a minimum of number 3. So maybe
Hmm.
power or connectivity, labor. And I would love to say that like renewable resources would be number 1. I would really love to say that, but I don't. I mean, just in reality of being able to build as quickly as we're needing to build right now, um, you know, they're all important. So it's trying to find that right mix, of doing it based on your schedule and what you're needing to accomplish as well.
Hmm. Appreciate the honesty.
Yeah, I mean, it is extremely important, and I know that it is a big part of like any site selection process at this point in time. So they're all have to be there. I just happen to think, and maybe it's because of my day-to-day niche, that skilled labor is a little undervalued when it comes to looking at that.
Hmm.
and shamelessly plugging one of our earlier episodes where we had Lee Kirby from Salute on, who also handled the military angle. So
Yeah.
just for everyone who hasn't listened to that, go grab that one. Well, with that note, thank you so much for coming on today,
Of course.
Brittany. This has been fantastic. I think you present us nerd types who's just sitting in an office with spreadsheets all day like an entirely different perspective, and it's very much appreciated. So thank you again for coming on.
No, of course. Thank you guys for having me. That's why we all exist, right? And we all need each other. And, it's just like anything else, getting a well-rounded view of our industry. We're living in very exciting times, in my view.
Absolutely.
That's our goal. Everyone stay tuned for our next episode coming soon. Take care.
Thanks, Brittany.